Yeah. Oh, well, welcome, Eliza.
Yes.
Okay. Eliza, uh, to the show. Pleasure to have you on Pale Blue Nexus. This is going to take a different sort of angle from the other episodes that I had, but it is an interest of mine, like just agriculture and food and everything that goes along with that. And who better to have on than a person who created a houseplant business, um, took it to the next level, and now is running the Farmlink Project. Eliza, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about all things plants.
So, uh, exactly, and I love plants. I'm a gardener. I think I left this out on the last episode. So let's find a common ground here. Tell me what did you like about plants to begin with? Like, what made you want to create the Sill?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great question. I started the Sill when I was 26, which was quite some time ago. And that happened to be 2012. And at that time, I was coming out of brand strategy as a primary or initial career. And I was very interested in taking an entrepreneurial track. And I was very intrigued by houseplants as a category, believe it or not. It was a personal experience that I had of, being in one of my very first apartments and trying to decorate with plants and, trying to make it feel more homey. And then come to find that there wasn't a lot of places where I could go shop for plants that were going to be inspiring or convenient or educate me or kind of offer like anything that one might come to expect from shopping any other category. And so I decided to create a consumer brand surrounding plants that would do all those things, that would be beautiful and educational and convenient. And so we started as a delivery service that basically was in my neighborhood because if you ordered from the website, I was going to be knocking on your door and handing you the product that you purchased. But we did blow up into a national brand. We were shipping nationally. We ended up having something like 12 stores in 10 different markets. Um, and now the Sill is a full-fledged online garden center. So you can buy not only house plants, which is the category you started with, but you can buy apple trees and hedges and all sorts of things. And it was an amazing adventure and skill set that ultimately then led me to Farmlink.
That's amazing. So you went from the sill to like the field or the farm, right?
Yeah,
It
right,
just
right. That's great. I love that.
and I get it. Like, were you living in the city where you just needed a decoration for the sill, right? Like I've been there. Like
Yeah.
I put the plants behind the blinds sometimes, and sometimes you have to roll it up a little bit. So
Right. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. In fact, I would have said, whatever, more than a decade ago that we specialized in like mini plants because everyone had mini sills and mini apartments and
yep.
definitely, related to my stage in life. And in some ways, that's actually continues to be true. I graduated from it and have moved on to the next chapter.
Speaking of graduation, you mentioned that you were studying. Where were you studying?
At NYU. So I was living in a teeny tiny village apartment on like the sixth floor of a walk up, just to paint a picture.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
now. Yeah, that's cool. How was your New York sort of experience going to school? That must have been awesome.
It was. I mean, I grew up in Western Massachusetts, which informs a lot of the decisions that I've made in my life, in fact, because I grew up in a very like agriculturally based community. I passed a cow field on my way to high school. And my high school was next to a vocational school, which I feel like doesn't exist in the same way anymore as it used to. And so going to the city was like the biggest contrast that like I could make for myself, and I loved it. I lived in New York City for 20 years but then ultimately left because I needed green grass again and I wanted to
Yeah.
be closer to my food chain and I wanted to, reconnect with nature.
Talk about that move from the city to, I would say, the country, but you probably didn't go all the way in the country.
Well, kind of. I live in the
Oh,
Catskills now, which is pretty
oh,
rural. My I live in a small hamlet of about 3,000 people, and I now again get to pass cows on the way to dropping my kids off at school. But I would say that the what's nice about where I am versus Massachusetts is the proximity to New York City, is I can still get on a train and in under 2 hours be in the middle of Manhattan. So it's
Okay. Yeah.
it's a transition with, a bit of a tail.
Yeah. So you are a country girl at heart.
I think I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I could totally resonate with that. And that's probably where your love of plants came in. So
Yeah.
totally resonate with that. Talk about the Farmlink Project. What is it?
Yeah. So the Farmlink Project is a national nonprofit. We are in the food recovery space, and most people then say, well, what does that mean? We will recover surplus produce all along the supply chain before retail, meaning a lot of food recovery institutions might pick up food that's, post expiration or on its way out from a grocery store. We collect food before it even gets to a store. That would be considered surplus and therefore might go to waste. And we redistribute that into the charitable food system. And this all started as a grassroots movement during COVID by a group of college students. So, juniors and seniors in school got together after they had been sent home from their jobs and sent home from their classes to try and get involved and be helpful. And one of the things that they recognized was that their local food bank was really in need of fresh food. And meanwhile, there was all these farms who had lost their business because hospitality effectively shut down overnight and were forced to effectively plow under a lot of their perfectly good food. So these students started renting U-Hauls and cold calling farms, and making that connection. And then they came to realize that while that was somewhat unique to COVID and the pandemic, it is actually a pretty significant breakdown in our supply chain, which is to say that there are so many people in need and there is a tremendous amount of surplus food in this country, but to actually transport it, to both coordinate the transportation of perishable goods and to pay for that transportation hasn't existed in a really material way. And that's where FarmLink has stepped in and we've done so at quite impressive scale. So in that first year, those college students moved 40 million pounds of food. And
Wow.
we are now moving, last year we moved 150 million pounds of food, and that's about 100 full truckloads a week.
Wow. So there's a really big business logistical problem here to make that happen, but it works.
It works, and the crazy thing is it's not actually all that complex. I think that was what surprised me most when I joined, was that actually coordinating and making this happen day to day is not the hardest thing. It's really, for us, it's been forming the relationships over the past 6 years so that when the surplus arises, we know exactly who to call because we have maybe 24 to 48 hours to move the food.
Right. And talk about that process itself. What happens there? Like, how does that day look like, or those
Yeah.
few days look like?
So, relationships, as I mentioned, that's like our currency. Like, we don't have assets as an organization. We don't have warehouse space. We don't own the trucks. Our relationships are what's most
Mm,
important. And so if we have 1,000 relationships spanning food donors to receiving agencies, whenever surplus arises, so again, we could have someone who failed to sell their load at the wholesale market one day, or an importer with the same type of situation, or a farmer who lost a sales order. All of these types of situations can happen, and they do happen every single day across every single commodity. Um, they know to call us, and then we have to consider who to call next. And that is a lot of decision making that we have learned over the course of 6 years of doing this. Oftentimes, it's closest proximity, right? Because we're also trying to be responsible about this food. It's also timing, but it's also understanding receiving agencies' capacity, like who can actually take a truckload of food, who's going to absorb and distribute it in a timely manner based on what it is and how much shelf life it has left. Like moving potatoes is very different than moving bananas, as you can imagine.
and where does this happen? Is this nationally or is this regional?
So most of our food in the United States that is grown here originates from California.
Okay.
Pretty obvious. That being said, you know, you probably can appreciate, like, apples are grown all along the Northeast, and citrus is grown, in Florida, and so there is food, and potatoes are the Northwest, so there is food being grown in all over the place, and we can move food from anywhere to anywhere, um, at scale. We move exclusively full truckloads, and then we do a lot of work with, folks who are importing food, from Mexico or from Canada, so in fact, our reach is really, all of North America to some extent.
Interesting. Talk about the end result of all of this. Like, how has this been received?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, talk about the success stories, about what people feel about this.
Well, look, this is like a massive opportunity because not only are we helping feed people, but this food would have otherwise gone to waste, which has a huge impact on our planet because food rotting in a landfill creates methane, which is not a greenhouse gas that you want in our atmosphere. So I would say it's a triple win because, we try and support farmers and we try and feed communities, and it's very much healing to the planet. It's one of the best interventions actually to climate change is diverting food waste. So all to say, like, it's been received quite well, um, and it's not to say that we invented food recovery or there's not an amazing ecosystem surrounding us, because I think what we also recognize as an organization is that you don't do this work alone. Like, we in fact are a representation of partnership and action because all we're doing is coordinating. Like, we're the connective tissue between existing groups, and so we very much depend on the great work of other organizations. But on the receiving end, the impact is enormous. I mean, we're talking about fresh food. The charitable food system often relies on, packaged, non perishable, oftentimes ultra processed foods. So we're getting the most healthful, the most fresh food into
Mm-hmm.
the hands of those who are in need. And when we think about what's happening now, just broadly speaking, like, berries aren't cheap. Like, I know
Yep.
that. You have a kid, you know that. So it's also one of these items that people get priced out of pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're very proud of the work that we do, that we're able to focus in this very specific way on produce and pre-retail because it does guarantee freshness.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Like, most people, they would, if they're on the lower income, they would go to the canned foods and not get the fresh stuff, which is what you're trying to do, or what you are doing,
Mhm.
is providing that level of access to the people who can't afford it.
That's right. Yeah. And the volume is in some ways hard to wrap your mind around. 150 million pounds is a lot. A common standard in the charitable food space is that 1.2 pounds is equivalent to a meal.
Hmm.
Obviously, a meal isn't just a bunch of apples, but it does just put things into perspective. That we're producing, you know, 100 what 25, 40 million meals out of that. And then when you think about servings, like, the math just grows. And so this is a material amount of food that we're getting to people's tables.
Wow. And how big is your network of food banks?
Well, I would say we probably work with like 500 receiving agencies. When we talk about food banks in this country, oftentimes you think of Feeding America. They have 198 networked food banks. But what a lot of people don't recognize is that there's also a lot of independent food banks too.
Hmm.
And we actually will work with any nonprofit willing to take a full truckload. So, like, if you have a very active church, we can come to your church parking lot and drop down a truckload of food. So we try and work with any organization who works with us.
I'm interested technically how you handle the logistics of all of this. Like, is there a spreadsheet somewhere, or
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, what's also very exciting for me, having just joined the Farmlink Project, is like, we're in an era that is never been seen before. And so
Hmm.
actually we can start to use technology in ways that even 6 months ago we weren't able to. So in fact, we are building um, a, a database now that pulls a lot of the manual work out of people's brains and will make it a lot faster to surface data and information and make decisions. And so we're very excited about applying tools like LLMs and just AI in general to the work that we're doing, because a lot of what we do is just communication. And some of that needs to have human intervention and judgment, of course, and some of it just doesn't. And so we're, again, entering a moment in time where efficiency is going to be achievable in ways that it just wasn't before.
Oh wow, now that you mentioned that, I can totally see how AI can help here, from a logistical point of view, administrative point of view.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
It's all data, and we know that there's lots of value in data, and sometimes you don't even know until you have it in front of you what questions to ask. But a lot of what we do is just trying to understand, one, um, who are all the agencies to begin with? Where are they? What is their capacity? When are they open? What kind of foods are culturally relevant to them? You know,
Interesting.
there's only so many spreadsheets and pivot tables you can create to like really get value out of that information. So for us, being able to create a database is actually going to be um, instrumental in being able to move food, move it effectively. And what we hope is that it'll also continue to help us unlock supply, because I think there's a lot of untapped supply as well in this country,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of hesitation about untapping it because of the coordination effort to then distribute it.
Is there the untapped area, is does that include restaurants?
For us, we look at farms because a
Okay.
lot of what gets wasted is unfortunately left in the field.
Okay.
Farmers already have this incredible burden of trying to turn a profit on what they do sell. It is impossible to ask them to pay for the harvest and packaging of food that they have not sold, and
Right.
yet there's billions of pounds of food left in the field every single year.
So your organization is in the sort of harvesting, collecting, and then processing it to a point where it's edible?
Well, we hope to continue to do what we call pre-harvest recovery work, which is more expensive than moving food that's already been harvested. But it is plentiful and it is there. And if we can do that in a way that both supports farmers and can feed people, that is a very large untapped opportunity. And to say, process, yes, but you don't even have to process it necessarily. It's just a matter of timing, of getting it out of the field and distributed to people in the time that they can consume.
Right. Yeah, there's like you said 48 hours, but there is really a time crunch going on, isn't there? Like all the time to get it to the right spot.
Mhm. Yeah, we've seen this. So there's a lot of actual news attention right now on the peach trees in California, and it's a really devastating challenge that these farmers have had because Del Monte declared bankruptcy last year, and Del Monte is a big canning company, and a lot of that is just reflective of like consumer behavior changing. Like people aren't eating canned peaches anymore, which is just and canned pears for that matter. And so we saw this last year immediately with pears. Actually, we worked on some harvesting of pears because Del Monte canning facility closed, and there was a farm in the Northwest that literally was just then sitting on hundreds of thousands of pears that were already harvested. And meant to go to this canning facility, and then the canning facility like closed, and then what? And so all of a sudden you have, all of these pears ready to go and nowhere to go, and yet you have 48 million food insecure Americans. And that in the instance of the peaches, because they've now determined that there's less of a market for these types of peaches, the state of California is actually paying the farmers to dig up the peach trees and replace it with crops that are more viable in the market. And so now we're seeing the destruction of all of these incredible peach trees, which is just, quite sad. And yet, we do what we can in terms of rescuing. But, we're up against big forces that,
Hmm.
put us in these positions.
So the demand for people for canned stuff has gone down. That's interesting. I'm wondering if it had anything to do with the pricing or alternatives. So like if you guys got into the canning industry, for example, right? Like would you make a profit there?
Yeah. Well, I'm not an economist, and it's so easy to, to make these assumptions about why things are the way they are. But of course, what I've come to learn in being in this organization is there's so many factors that go into this. Like, I'm sure, like, the price of aluminum going up has something to do with it.
Hmm.
Sure, changing consumer sentiment and diets has something to do with it. And it's all the things, right? So, it's hard to pinpoint like what the one thing is, but what I think about in terms of Farmlink especially is we have pinpointed this one intervention that we know does work, and that there are many more, as I mentioned earlier. Like, this is all about the bigger ecosystem and relationships, um and that's what's really exciting is that I think as we continue to evolve and adopt technology and create efficiencies, we will also be able to develop new interventions for some of this work because it's not going to just be one thing.
That's interesting. Very interesting. So there's a ton of challenges and a ton of problems here and that you probably see every day.
Yeah.
So how do you guys get funded?
So we get funded because of amazing donors. We have corporate partnerships. We get funded by foundations through grants, and then individuals. So you can go to our website and donate $5. You can be someone who's able to write a bigger check than that. But right now it's 100% philanthropy. We don't have an earned revenue stream. That is something that we are, continuing to hold curiosity around, but we've been very lucky that there's a lot of people who believe in the work that we're doing in this particular intervention. And again, as I mentioned, you can be interested in food insecurity, you could be interested in waste reduction, you could be interested in the American farmer, you could be interested in climate. All of those things intersect in the work that FarmLink does. And so I think we've been really lucky to attract a lot of different donors who are motivated by different things.
You probably have a bigger perspective than I do here, but tell me, I do live in a country area, so I have farmers around me. But
Mhm.
talk to me about farmers and farming as a profession as it is today.
Yeah.
And is it making a comeback? Is people talk about
Unfortunately,
HVAC
no.
and plumbing? No.
I mean, there we see all this Instagram content, and trad wives are becoming a thing, and people want to homestead, but the reality is that farmers in America are getting crushed, and there's very little ability to have solid succession planning because it's just a very hard way to make a living. All of the costs are going up. So cost of machinery and cost of fertilizer, the cost to get into farming, it's an enormous hurdle. If you're a 22-year-old coming out of college and you're like, well, I could start a website for free, or I could start a farm for hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is it going to be? And so unfortunately, I think we're finding that we are in a position that we are not supporting our farmers enough, which obviously puts our food at risk.
Hmm.
Tree. We rely a lot on importing our food, and instead we reward a lot of the big consolidated farm ops that don't actually really make food. They're making inputs. They're making ethanol or animal feed or other things. So I think it's really tough to be a farmer right now. And we could spend an entire hour just talking about that, but that's why I say, it's really not up to the farmer to put in the extra uh, overhead to harvest this food to donate it because they're already know
Right.
its place.
And what are the demographics of the farming industry? Are they mostly mom and pop shops, family businesses, or are they more corporatized now?
They are more corporatized now. There's a lot of consolidation that has taken place over the past couple generations. Um, I can't speak to it fluently other than what I would recommend for you is you read the Farm Bill, A Citizen's Guide to the Farm Bill, which is a great book that breaks it all down for you to understand kind of how we even got to where we are today. And it has to do with a lot of incentives and programs put in place. And obviously the Farm Bill has evolved over 100 plus years. But yeah, a lot of what goes on starts from the very top.
This is kind of like one of those things like my father-in-law talks a lot about like he's in the trucking industry and it's like everything that's you touch was brought to you by a truck, but
Yeah.
people don't think about that, but also
Mhm.
people don't think about where their food comes from either.
That's
Like
right.
you're literally talking about the one thing that we can't screw up is the farm, and then it's filled with all these problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's often something that, yeah, to exactly what you said, people don't know about it. They're not aware of the complexity or what we're up against or the fact that the farm bill is actively being worked on right now. Unfortunately, those aren't the things that were taught in school and ought to be. Just as important as growing your own food for, a variety of reasons. I think it's important to know how the food system works. And I feel very lucky to be now in this position, getting a quite the education on it.
Where do you see this organization going in like 5 years into the future? Where do you see what's the vision for it?
Yeah. I think there's three things that are most important for Farmlink. I think the first is, of course, continuing to do what we do well today, which is move food. I think there's ways in which we can move food that are more effective. So you talked about impact earlier in the conversation. Our team is getting really interested in not just moving more pounds of food, but knowing what the impact is and how to measure that. So that's often what comes up in an early stage nonprofit is going from acting to measuring and understanding kind of what that looks like. There's a really important second piece to this, which is the fact that we were founded by students. So, this youth leadership aspect has always been part of the DNA here at FarmLink. And one of the ways in which we continue to cultivate that is through a fellowship we call Field. So, we take a cohort of students every single year and teach them about food systems and then point them at a problem that they get to go be on the ground and learn about. So, they get partnered with a farm or a food bank. And then it all culminates in a final project. We would like to see that continue to expand because I think part of our responsibility isn't just trying to fix one part of the problem, but actually creating more problem solvers. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think that is quite unique to FarmLink and being able to do both of those things really well. Um, and I think the third thing is just continued innovation, right? So I said, like, it's not going to just be one thing. Like, we could be biggest, fastest, smartest, whatever, whatever. And like, it's not going to solve the root cause of hunger or the root cause of food waste. It takes us in partnership with many. And so I think the third piece will be innovation and continuing to actually create new interventions. This one happens to work really well, and it's going to be one of many. So, how else can we take sort of the model in which we were started and scaled and do that in other ways that touch on food waste, food insecurity, climate, and the American farmer?
Yeah, it almost feels like you're setting the stage to solve some bigger problems within the industry, which is interesting uh angle. You're seeing this from a logistical point of view, but then you're also seeing solutions that could possibly be fixing things, which is puts
Yeah.
you in an interesting spot.
Well, I would say as someone who's entrepreneurial by nature, seeing a boatload of problems like this is actually really fun and exciting because
Hmm.
all you have is problems to solve, and many of them are very solvable. Like even what we're doing today, you know, it's just a lot of logistics.
Yeah. Yeah, they need the Silicon Valley folks need to put some pitch decks together and solve some of these problems for you, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we hope to have their support.
Oh, very good, very good. So that's kind of like one of the things you're actively doing is engaging with the students, having
Mhm.
them come in and do that. So I totally get where you're going with
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Okay, so Eliza, thank you so much for your time today. This is a great sort of like synopsis and lowdown of the food
Yeah,
industry. I plan to do some nice clipping of these and hopefully bring some awareness to the industry.
that's amazing. Yeah, and farmlinkproject.org is where you can go learn more about us and donate, and I hope your listeners do, and we're just excited to continue to get the word out. So thank you so much for having me on the conversation.
Thanks for coming and for providing this perspective. It was really refreshing. Thank you.